Hello everyone, and welcome back to the International Trumpet Guild 2021 Virtual Conference. My name is Dr. John Marchiando, and I'm the Professor of Trumpet here at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. I'm also the Principal Trumpet of the New Mexico Philharmonic. I'm a member of Summit Brass and Tromba Mundi, and I also perform with the Enchantment Brass and Fountain City Brass Band. Today's session, Bright Ain't Necessarily a Bad Word, Tips for Finding the Brilliance in Your Tone, is based on a lot of teaching that I do when I see my students here at the University of New Mexico, but when I also see students at the Rafael Mendez Brass Institute, or when students come through Albuquerque and take lessons, or whenever I give classes at other universities, things like that. These are all tips that I generally give to help students find more vibrance in their tone. And we'll get into definitions of what I think those terms mean in a bit here in the session. But I really felt I had an opportunity to reach a much greater audience today with this session. And so we're going to talk about this stuff, and hopefully you'll come out of this session feeling better about some of the things you can do to make your sound project better. Hopefully we'll improve range, we'll improve technical issues, endurance. These are all subordinate benefits of playing with a sound that is fully vibrant and brilliant. So, without further ado, let's jump in. So what do I mean when I use the term brilliance? I think brilliance is a term that many people use interchangeably with other terms that are similar, like vibrance or resonance. These are terms you hear your teachers use a lot, and other professionals talk about that term. But when I say brilliance, to me, brilliance has another connotation to it. There's a color attached to brilliance. Vibrance and resonance don't necessarily have a color attached to it. And this is where the title of the session comes in. To me, brilliance has a color of bright attached to it. I know, I just said a bad word in the trumpet world, bright. But let's think about it. Bright is what we do. As trumpet players, that's the color that's demanded of us in the orchestras. Do we have to play all colors? Yes. But when push comes to shove, what is it that the trumpet provides to the orchestra in all those exciting moments? It's the color of bright, it's the color of brilliance. And I think that we tend to lose track of that in our efforts to find our dark and warm colors. Don't buy into the bright versus dark thing. Is something I always say at classes. It's because it's not a thing. Oftentimes, the colors that we play with when we think we're playing dark is actually pretty dull. Not really vibrant, not really projecting, and it's not interesting to listen to. So don't be afraid of the term bright. It's not a bad word. Now, is there such thing as bad bright colors? Sure there are. Of course there are. If there's too much tension, the bright can be shrill. If we're overblowing, the bright can be spread and ugly. So there are things we can do, though, to find the bright colors and make them be colorful and still contain much of the low overtones in our series, in our overtone series, that will give it balance and body and still be full of just zing and resonance. And so there are three things that I work on to help find these things, and they are, and how we're going to discuss them today. They are in order: breathing, oral shape, and minimizing motion. It's those three things. And there are things that I teach my students to work on a lot to help these three things, which then helps us all find the brilliance in tone. So let's get into number one, breathing. So breathing is a topic that is talked about exhaustively within the brass world, wind world, even singing world, and with good reason. We're instruments that need a certain amount of wind power to operate correctly, and finding a kinesthetic memory for how to do those things properly is important. But here's the thing. I believe that your body is naturally already programmed to breathe properly. I'm not anti-breathing exercise. I'm not anti-breathing things because I think they can be helpful. But I also think breathing exercises can be dangerous, especially for high brass players like trumpet players, if we don't do them correctly. We have to understand that most of the breathing exercises that have been written that we do were thought up by tuba players. Tuba players have a much different flow rate of air that they have to use to play their instrument than we do. Okay, and so I don't want to sit here and tell you not to do any of the breathing exercises you might do. Absolutely do them. If you feel they help you, you should do them. They help you. That's real. However, I don't spend a lot of time doing breathing exercises other than this short process I'm about to show you. And so going back to the natural breathing, the idea of that, again, your body already does it. I'm breathing sitting here talking to you on this video. You're breathing sitting there listening to me. We're all already experts at breathing. And so if we can use some of the natural tendencies that our bodies want to use in our breathing, it can make for much easier memory of those things. So let's talk about some of the breathing fundamentals that I talk about. I don't necessarily believe in the breathe from the diaphragm, breathe from fill from the bottom up, and all those things. I don't think any of those things are necessary for us. I think if we just try to breathe as naturally as we do, sitting here like that, keep in mind that the human body is designed to move big amounts of air already. I'm a tall person. I'm sitting right now, but I'm 6'4", and so I've never had my capacity measured, but I would guess I'm somewhere around 6, maybe even close to 8 liters of breathing capacity. And when I do this, I am moving most of that capacity in and out quickly. That was a matter of seconds. And so if you think about that, that's, let's just for the sake of comparison say I have 8 liters of breathing capacity. That is 4 of those 2-liter bottles of soda filled with air that I just moved in and out with ease. Again, the human body is designed to move a lot of air already. It has to for when we do athletic endeavors like running or sports or running from our life from a bear. And so we don't need to really change anything about what it can already do naturally. And so many of these easy concepts that I'm going to talk about just now are taken directly from what I've learned from Arnold Jacobs' teaching. One of the biggest regrets I have in my career is that I never got to sit down and have a lesson with Jake. But my colleague here at the University of New Mexico, Dr. Chris Buchholz, our trombone professor, did. And I've chatted with him at length about some of what Jake talked about. And so I want to share those with you today. The first being, let's talk about the in-breath. Okay, let's talk about how we breathe in. There's a lot of people who have all these things that we have to breathe from the diaphragm, right? We've heard that term, breathe from the diaphragm. I don't know about you, but I don't have an opening down here that I can breathe from my diaphragm. I breathe from here or here. Okay? When I'm playing trumpet, I breathe from here. And I mean that literally. I breathe creating the suction of intake here at my lips. This is, again, directly from Arnold Jacobs' teaching. If we breathe in a way where we create the suction here at our lips, then everything else behind you, behind that, in your throat, in your shoulders, your chest, and your diaphragm can behave naturally and just breathe naturally. And so a way that I talk about and teach how to do that, and this is if you've done some of the breathing gym things by Sam Palafian and Pat Sheridan, you've seen this trick, is to put your hand in front of your mouth and breathe and create the suction here and breathe around your hand. And if you breathe around your hand, you hear it makes that kind of nice whistle. You know, there's a nice whistle. Okay? If you breathe anywhere else, if you create the suction, this is very popular, is to create the suction for your breath back in the throat. Right? I call that the Darth Vader breath. You saw I just about choked on it. I call that the Darth Vader breath. Right? And to me, when I breathe that way, okay, I'm without effect. That makes me feel, I feel tension back in my throat because I'm trying to open my throat. And we can't open our throat. It's not physically possible to open your throat. What you're doing when you feel your throat open is taking the very bottom of your tongue here in the back of your throat and jamming it up against your voice box, okay? And that creates tension. However, if we create the suction here at our lips, all of a sudden the back of the throat can just be relaxed, which feels open, right? So we don't physically have to open our throat. So everybody, if you just try that, try putting your hand in front of your face and take a nice breath, but create the suction here at your lips. And then when you do that, you'll feel everything behave naturally. You saw my throat was relaxed. You saw my shoulders probably moved a little bit. You saw my chest expand. You saw my diaphragm move probably. You know, my back expanded behind you, behind my chair here. You would if you were back there. And so all these things happen naturally. I'm not thinking about them. I don't want to think about them when I'm going to play trumpet. I want to be thinking about making music and making a beautiful sound. I don't want to be thinking about my diaphragm. You know, your diaphragm is going to move when you breathe, whether you want it to or not, because it has to. It's physics of the human body. And so why do we have to think about it? We don't. We don't have to think about the diaphragm. So step number one, forget the diaphragm and breathe from here, right? Try that. So now there are some other things I do to kind of then introduce the resistance of the instrument to my breathing. And so when I first start every day, I do a couple of just easy breaths, just like that, and I release. Again, that's your body's natural tendency, is to release the air that is just taken in. I'm trying to eliminate the term blow, at least as a verb, from the lexicon of trumpet language. And so this, if we think about releasing air rather than pushing or blowing air, again, more vibrance can happen. And so I do this, a couple simple breaths like that. Just, and I just release. Takes a couple seconds, right? Then I'll slowly start introducing the resistance of the instrument to my breathing, because I want my breathing to, I want the instrument to fit to my breathing, not my breathing to fit to the instrument, right? And so the next thing I'll do is I'll take my mouthpiece, and I will just, same thing, I'll breathe around the mouthpiece. Hence, that's partly why we use our hand, is because then when we go to play trumpet, our mouthpiece is right there. And I'll breathe around the mouthpiece, and then I'll just release through the mouthpiece, but without my embouchure, just with my lips wrapped around the mouthpiece, like this. You'll notice that I lasted a little longer, okay? I tried to release with the same feeling of the flow rate I had when I released with no resistance. So this is zero resistance. This is now adding the resistance in my mouthpiece. And the idea is I'm trying to mimic the feel of release. And when I do that, my body automatically adjusts the flow rate to feel that way. And so it automatically gets rid of the air slower when I add resistance. You can see I lasted a little longer. Then the next step in this, I'll go ahead and do is add my embouchure. No buzzing though. I'm just going to add the embouchure. I'm going to breathe in and release through the embouchure. You can hear I lasted a little longer. Again, to me that felt like I was releasing at the exact same rate I did without the mouthpiece. But because of the resistance of the mouthpiece, my body automatically adjusted the flow rate, and so I released slower. I didn't think about it. I just let it happen, right? Then the next step I will do in this little session of breathing, I'll do all of these things 2, 3, 4 times, depending on how I feel. If I feel like in the morning goes pretty quickly, I'll do it once or twice. If I'm feeling a little tired or tense, I might do it 3, 4, 5 times. Who knows? But the next step that I do in this step is then to introduce the lead pipe. And so I take what I do is I take this out and I put it in the bottom and let it hang. But if you want to put it on a chair or in your case, those are the best things. Don't put it on your stand. It will fall off. And so the next step I do is I add the lead pipe, but I do it in a slightly interesting way here. So I'm going to breathe and release just like I did in the step prior through my embouchure. I wasn't trying to make my lips buzz. They just kind of happened. What causes that? Well, the physics of the trumpet. We've now added a length of tubing long enough to create the standing pressure wave, which now pushes back and creates the resistance, enough resistance that the lips are forced to vibrate, right? And so it bounces back and the lips vibrate, and then we get vibration. And by vibration, I mean that the lips are literally vibrating, but they're not touching. It's not what we do in the trumpet. The lips vibrate, but they don't buzz. Again, I'm trying to eliminate the word buzz from the lexicon of trumpet language as well. And so this is a great trick to try to find that feeling of not buzzing per se, but feeling the embouchure just activate and vibrate without tension and without blowing so hard. Then I will actually do a couple little exercises on the lead pipe as well. Just try and find, on most trumpets, that note that comes out there is going to be an F sharp on your trumpet, and I'll just play that note and then kind of jump up between the partials. So if you have a low F sharp, a high G, and then a high D. And if you'd like, try to go up to the high G above that. I should correct myself, it's an F, not an F sharp, but you get the picture. But so, and that's going to be different. It could be different on your horn depending on your lead pipe. If you have a reverse lead pipe, the pitches might be slightly different than a standard lead pipe, or if the length of the lead pipe is weird in some way. But so, and so these are the tricks that I shouldn't say tricks. These are they're not tricks. They're like proven ideas that help me find brilliance in the tone. Okay, so when I'm playing on the lead pipe that way, what I'm doing is I feel like I'm just releasing nice and easy. I'm not pushing at all, and I try to bring that into my trumpet playing. Okay, so the next set of ideas is we're going to talk about some oral shape things. One of the hardest things to diagnose in a player issues, if they're having issues, is whether the oral shape is correct or not. Mainly because we can't see, unless I don't know anybody who has an X-ray machine in their studio, but maybe you do. Maybe that's the next step in technology for trumpet teachers is X-ray machines on your iPhones that can tell what the oral shape is doing. But that is the hardest thing to diagnose, and oftentimes is overlooked in support of saying more air, or use the air better, or blow through that, or all those terms that don't really mean anything. What does blow through it mean? What are we blowing through? Are we blowing through the phrase? Are we blowing through the trumpet? Are we blowing through the lips? Are we blowing through? What are we trying to do? And so many of those teaching tools that are used are not necessarily all that helpful because they're not all that defined. And so oral shape is most often, the missed step in diagnosing an issue with someone who's having some troubles. And so I want to talk a little bit about the common teaching tools. And I don't want to say any of these things are wrong or incorrect. It's not that they're wrong or incorrect. I just think they're harder. It's more difficult to play trumpet with the incorrect oral shape. And I'm all for easier. I don't know about you. I want to do things that are easier. I don't golf anymore because it's hard for me. I stink at it. Those of you who've golfed with me know how bad I am at it. And so I don't want to do things that that are hard for me. We're all that way. And so oral shape is something that we need to sort of tune into more about how we would sing things. There's a great book by Pete Bond about, in fact, it just was released. My copy's in the mail. The Singing Trumpet, and it's a great read on this process of thinking about singing. And I'm not going to go into as much detail as Pete does. I suggest all of you get it and read the book. I'm just going to touch the surface here about it, but I think it's really important. And so opera singers spend hours and hours trying to find the most resonant positions for each of their vowels. That's what they do in the practice rooms. Trying to find the most resonant way to say an oo or an e or an ah, and most of them come back to the sense that it's mostly an e position, and then they alter the front of their mouth, like their lips and everything, to make a u or an o or an a sound like those vowels, but the oral shape is still somewhat, if not fully, in an e. Okay, and what do I mean by E? When I was studying with Gatala at Michigan as an undergraduate, he would always have us try to say E. You'd walk by his studio and you'd hear Gatala going E, and the student going E, E, E. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know what he wanted me to do back then. I was young. I didn't know. Now I think I understand a little better what he meant. But trying to find the forward sort of oral space, which then encapsulates our sinuses and our skull and our chest, combined to help to create this brilliance that I'm talking about. And so something I will do a lot in my own playing is just kind of model how I would sing something. How would I sing that phrase? And I like to sing it in the falsetto. To me, I go to the falsetto because it's more like what trumpet playing is to me. You can hear that's pretty loud, it's pretty vibrant. You can also see I'm not working that hard to do it. And that's the secret. Opera singers can fill halls without the use of a metal, a megaphone. And so they can do this with low effort, so can we. And so trying to find, automatically when you think about that singing thing, you automatically, your flow rate adjusts again, once again, to a lower place than what we think we need to have. Okay, one of the biggest things I work on with students is overblowing. And if you have an oral shape that's really low and in the back of the throat, creating the sort of the compression, and Joey Tartell's going to freak, but it's not compression so much as just the resistance. That's a better word. The resistance in the back of your throat rather than in the forward part of your mouth. Again, you can play trumpet just fine with that. I just think it's harder. And to play loud and to play high is more difficult with the tongue sort of arched in back of our throat. If we think of having the tongue arched in front, then all of a sudden it's easier. And you can hear that difference on a trumpet. I'm just going to play a G and a staff to demonstrate. Okay, that's with the sort of open, ah shape. Ah. Now I'm going to move my oral shape forward thinking. And I could hear the difference in the room. All of a sudden something in my studio here started vibrating because my sound was vibrating. And I didn't work any harder. To your ear, you probably heard the sound as being much fuller, much louder. I was actually blowing a little bit less hard. just by changing the oral shape. And so this is an important aspect of how we play that is missed, you know. And I'll admit, as a teacher for many years before I was introduced to these concepts, I taught all these standard, you know, air things. You know, move the air, more air, support with the air. No. Look, air. We need air, obviously, but we don't need as much air to make that kind of vibrance as we think we do. Okay, so this kind of goes back to the breathing a little bit. You know, the famous French pedagogues, you know, Ramon Sabaric and you know, even Maurice Andre and others would say it takes just a trickle of air to play trumpet. They may be right. I don't know. I don't really. I haven't monitored what the flow rate actually is that I'm playing with. I don't know what the definition of a trickle is, but it's certainly I'm using much less air than I used to, and because of that, my lips are now less tense and tight. Okay, when you blow too hard against the lips, they resist that air power, if you will, and then they get tight and they vibrate tightly. When you have a flow rate, and again, what's helped me find this flow rate is both the breathing exercises I did previous, but also the change in my oral shape. And I'd say the change in my oral shape was the first thing I noticed that made a difference in that. And so when I play, I'm thinking about trying to sing and have my oral shape forward and create that vibrant sound all the time. And so an exercise I'll kind of do throughout the day just to kind of, you know, check that you know, what I'm doing and find that same color of sound and oral shape throughout the register is just to play easy sort of blanket, you know, slurs, easy. Starting on low C, slurring up a fifth, up a fourth, up a third, up a third, minor third, you know, to each of the partials. And what I'm trying to do here is just maintain the same oral shape and vibrance of sound that's created by it. It may sound like I'm playing loud. I'm not. I'm just playing comfortable. That's my sort of default setting sound, default setting volume when I just release the air and create vibrance in the sound. And that's what projects. That, you know, Marcel Tableteau, the famous oboe player from the Philadelphia Orchestra, would always say that. Resonance projects, volume does not. I've used these teaching techniques with our marching band here at the University of New Mexico, the Spirit Marching Band. And the trumpet section has routinely placed in among the top sections in the best section award every year. If they don't win it, they're runner-up. But it's because I introduce them to these things, and they all start to play with much less effort, and they're playing louder than they ever did before. Okay, and so playing trumpet is not about effort. It's not about having superhuman lung power. If you ever really closely watch Bud Herseth or Phil Smith or Tommy Stevens, the great orchestra players, play, it looked like they weren't working because they weren't. They were doing this. They were playing with a flow rate that was lower than we think it is so that the lips can vibrate, and they were trying to create brilliance and vibrance in the sound. And if we try to do that in our everyday playing, in our fundamentals, in our Clarks, in our Belk studies, in our whatever we play for the day, and then try to take that into our playing, that can help quite a bit. And so I will spend a lot of time singing throughout the day. I'm not talking hours, but if I feel I'm starting to get a little tight, I will pull out my singing and play and sing the lick, and try to find a way to create the vibrance as if I'm singing. I'll literally imagine I'm trying to sing through the trumpet. right? That whole time I'm just trying to sit here and work on trying to keep that forward vibrance, that ease of singing in the falsetto. And my flow rate kind of adjusted itself again normally. I didn't really think about it. I just felt myself breathe and release. So if we incorporate these breathing techniques where we think about ease of breath, oral shape that's elevated and forward to create vibrance. Again, what this helps us do is it helps us to find the bright overtones that make the trumpet a trumpet. If we sort of try to settle down into the bottom of the pitch, again, this is another technique I admit I used in the past. It makes sense. Let's settle into the bottom of the pitch. That will create, a huge, broad sound. I guess it makes sense, but it doesn't work, because when we start trying to play into the bottom of the pitch, if you will, that kills those bright overtones, and then all of a sudden it's no longer really a trumpet sound. Okay, and so what we want to do is activate those upper ones. What I just played was certainly brilliant and vibrant, but would you say it was overly bright and ugly? No, it still had a lot of the low overtones activated as well. Those tones will activate naturally if we just let the lips vibrate freely. We don't need to try to do those. Those are all there. So the final set of exercises and things that I do have a lot to do with now. It's basically minimizing motion. So let's look into those. So the third segment of my session today that I'd like to talk about is how we can minimize motion. One of the things that takes away most from creating a resonant sound that vibrates and creates brilliance is moving too much, is literally moving the aperture around too much and altering the airstream too much, and that causes vibrance to be lost and when we play inefficiently with motion. Okay, and so I want to talk a little bit about some of the things I do and I teach to help my students minimize their motion. My concepts for this are based somewhat in the teachings of Carmine Caruso. I am by no means an expert of Carmine Caruso's teachings. I'm familiar with them. I was introduced to them by Chris Gecker at the Aspen Music Festival. But I use them, sparingly in terms of my own playing of those exercises. But the concepts, I think, that I've translated from what I've learned, I think, have become what are valuable. And so, if you want to talk with an expert who knows the Caruso system very well, you should talk with Julie Landsman, the former principal horn of the Metropolitan Opera. She's the expert on Caruso teaching. But some of the things I do throughout my day of practicing, depending on how I feel, is I'll actually pull out some of the exercises from the Caruso book. I generally limit it to the first couple, the 6 notes or seconds, based on what I feel I need to work on. But I don't do a great deal of practicing of actual Caruso exercises. If you're not familiar with the Caruso exercises, basically Caruso created a series of exercises that he called calisthenics for brass. And the idea is that you practice these with the intent of repeating the same motion over and over again so that it started to stick. And that these calisthenics were an exercise to practice minimizing variables in your playing. And so the calisthenics were not meant to be played with an intent to sound good. They were meant to be played with an intent to repeat the same motion over and over again. I use these concepts in a way, though, that I believe is what works for me. How I use them is thus. I believe in practicing, a little bit every day, trying to focus on the idea of keeping the blow, and I use the term the blow as a noun. The blow of how we play in a way that we're trying to keep all of that the same. And so when I'm doing my long tones every morning, and it can be whether you're doing Chikowitz or Stamp or Schuberg or some kind of long tones. Every day I'm practicing trying to minimize motion in my playing by trying to keep as much everything the same. But I'm focusing most on keeping the blow the same in terms of how the air goes through my lips out forward. In terms of keeping my lips and embouchure exactly the same, I don't do as much of that. How I've translated Caruso to practicing my fundamentals and practicing music is that I work on trying to keep the blow the same, and I let my lips do what they want. And if the blow remains the same, the lips will not overreact to the blow. If the blow is, so if your blow is moving too much, the lips tend to overreact with that. And so every once in a while, though, I will pull out 6 notes and just do that and work to keep everything exactly the same for a while. So I will pull out my long tones, and I'll do my Clarks this way, working on trying to move as little as possible and keep the blow as set as possible. Another thing I do every day is some of Scott Belk's great flexibilities. And so the flexibility that I'm on right now, I think it's called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, out of his second book. And what I do with this kind of exercise is practice this idea of trying to keep the blow in the same place and letting my lips move where they need to. But then what starts to happen is the targets we think we need to play get smaller and closer, right? I mean, the distance between. I'll demonstrate on a Belk study. I used to play these before I did some of these adjustments in my playing, and I would move quite a bit. Right, and I'd move quite a bit there. You can see I was maybe exaggerating a little, but now what I try to do is work on keeping my oral shape forward, keeping the vibrance of the sound that I want, that I talked about earlier, and I work on trying to keep everything as set with the blow as I can, and then I find that my lips don't have to move as much to make things change. And so you probably could have heard, hopefully you heard in my playing, the difference between the first and second one. The first, while good and sounded clean, was a little less stable. Second one felt much more stable. All those slots felt much closer together because I wasn't moving as much. So that's how I take the Caruso concepts into my playing, and then I've come up with a couple other things that I do to help with specifics within the technique of what might be being played in your etude or solo, or even the fundamentals. So let's talk a little bit about flexibility and how we can apply this thing to slur type stuff. And so something I'll talk to my students about a lot is to say, catch the partials. I say catch the partials. Work on trying to catch the partials in all your large slurs, right? What I'm doing there by catching all those slurs is that I'm forcing myself to stay on the note as long as I possibly can. I'm forcing myself to think horizontally about connecting notes rather than think one note and then another note higher. And when we can start minimizing that kind of motion, again, and that's only that B flat to G, a sixth. That's not that big of a skip, but this applies to a lot of other bigger things too. And then I say, next step is try to catch the partials much quicker. So that time I caught them much quicker, and you heard there was just a little tiny blip in front of them, but that almost sounds like a slide. That's like our portamento as trumpet players. So don't worry about catching the partials. If you catch a couple, but it sounds nice and clean anyways, great. Most times you'll not even get to the partials. slur. I was trying to catch partials. I missed. I missed in a good way though. I'll do a lot of work with that, even in skeletons when I'm doing technical things. Sometimes I'm doing skeletons, removing articulation. I'll practice catching slurs. So another practice tool that I use, and I'll kind of do this right now to practice the beginning of the third movement of the Oasen Sonata. Lots of skips, right? Lots of skips around that kind of get us tricked up, right? And so one of the things I'll start doing is using this thing that I just talked about to practice catching the partials between all those slurs. But I'm going to skeletonize. I'm going to take out the articulation, take out the tempo. I'm just going to work on playing with the color I want, the volume I want, but much slower and slurred. But I'm going to catch partials. Right? Now I'm going to try it a little faster. Still going to worry about partials. If they happen, they happen. I'm not going to worry. Right? And so I'm now already starting to feel things shrink in terms of the skips. I have another tool that I use though, from when I'm getting to the point where I'm approaching tempo and I'm approaching trying to work on getting the articulation and stuff added. And it's, I call it the air pattern in the horn. We've all heard of doing air patterns, and I think air patterns can be very valuable, just practicing, right? We've all heard that. And I think that's very valuable, but I like to do the air pattern in the horn more often than not, because I want to equate my physical feeling of what I'm feeling to make music with the actual music that's happening in a way. So color of sound and style of articulation, note length, things like that. So how I practice the air pattern is I do it in the horn, and I pick a note somewhere within the range of the thing, of the lick, and I'll play that note and finger on the lead pipe. So in this case, let's say I'm going to use a G to play this opening lick of the Oasen third movement, right? And I'm working on trying to keep the exact color and note length and articulation I want, and vibrating my sound like crazy. And then I finger on the lead pipe. Man, I tell you, I wanted to move a lot there. It was a lot to make myself stay in that vibrant sound. Starting to feel better. Now I go ahead and add in the notes. Except for that first little blip, that all felt much better, just much more centered. I didn't, my brain was telling me the targets were much farther apart than they really are. But here I got to work on keeping the targets more into the sound target, right? And so everything shrunk, everything got closer together. And so the minimizing motion of our playing is something that can, when we start doing that and we stay in the vibrant, brilliant sound target. I don't like to use center per se, because we're not necessarily centering everything. We're just playing where it's vibrant. So these are some tools that I use to continue to minimize motion. I'll use these in my Clarks some days. Some mornings when my Clarks are struggling, I'll do that. I'll finger my Clarks on my lead pipe and play one note, the first note of the Clark, right? And if you're moving too much, you'll hear it. You'll hear it. Why am I missing so much? Aha. Much cleaner, much more stable, centered, vibrant. So try some of these tricks to help with your maintaining vibrance and minimizing motion, eliminating the variables of your motion. Everything's a lot closer than you think. Thank you for tuning in to my session today. These topics are things that are very important to me in my teaching. And I want to add a couple disclaimers to this that these topics that I discussed, these concepts that I discussed today, will only work if your embouchure is in good working order. If you have an embouchure issue due to the placement of your mouthpiece or just how how you've set up and need an embouchure change, you should probably look into going through with that. So call your local professional who can teach you this, who can work with you to make give you an embouchure that's going to be more efficient and work better. And another thing that I didn't really talk about, but goes with the whole breathing part especially, but with all this, is just posture. Making sure you're playing with a posture. Again, I'm not really into the whole rigid back edge of the seat thing that many middle schoolers and beginners are taught. As long as you get your thorax off your abdomen, then you should be able to breathe properly. If you're slouched over and your thorax is in your abdomen, if you just get those separated, then you can get the sort of full chest and lung area breathing that we need. So those are the couple things I wanted to add here in this last portion of my talk. So thank you to all of you for tuning in. I appreciate very much you coming to listen to what I have to say. Thank you to the International Trumpet Guild for arranging this incredible event. Grant Peters, all the officers, all the board of directors. Every year this session, these conferences are events that are so great to be a part of when I get to be a part of them. And I thank you all. I'm honored to have been a part of this one as well. Thank you to Jean-Christophe Dobrzelewski and his team of helpers, and to the members of the committees that helped form this particular conference. It's what a conference. Let me just say that. We may never get one full of this much stuff ever again. But so thank you for all your work, guys, to making this virtual concert be what it is. Thank you to Samantha Lane and the amazing team of trumpet builders over at S.E. Shires in the Boston area who make my instruments. I'm a S.E. Shires artist. And I bring them up because it was my switch to Shires that was the impetus for me to begin considering these concepts. I realized finally I had a horn that I didn't have to battle, and I needed to make some changes in my playing to make it easier for myself. And so these instruments were something that were important to my development as a teacher as well and player. So and so I hope everyone enjoyed what I had to say, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference that you attend. And thank you for tuning in. I hope you are all looking towards the end of the tunnel here for the pandemic, and that we all can be back on the stage soon, or back in the audience listening, or both. And I hope that our next conference is something that we can do in person, so I can see all of you again, my friends, my colleagues. And even if I don't know you, we can sit down, have a meal, have a drink, and talk trumpet. I look forward to that day. Thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Take care.